Today is Tuesday, November 25th, 2025. This is Quick Start from CBN News. I'm Dan Andros. A major showdown is brewing between President Trump and Venezuela. We'll have that top story and more on today's podcast, where we bring you news from a Christian perspective. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a rating. You can always email us as well. quickstartpodcast@cbn.org. That's our email address. We're glad you're here with us as we're getting through the news of the day. We do it each and every weekday, bright and early. With me today, CBN's Trey Goins-Phillips and Madison Seals. A lot to get to, as always, on the focus story. An Ohio court, Madison, has reversed its decision to shut down a church ministry that was just running a homeless shelter.
Yeah, and just in time for the cold season. So Ohio's 6th District Court of Appeals reversed its decision to shut down this church ministry running a homeless shelter after years of hitting this church with all kinds of code violations and civil suits. So this is great news for that community, and we can get into that more for today's focus.
Yeah, for sure. Great update there. Like you said, in time for cold season. So common sense hopefully prevailing here. We'll have the details coming up in just a moment. Also on the main thing, the last living hostage left in Israeli hospital, lights off, recovery just beginning. We go inside the first moments. Doctors see that photos don't fully show. So all that's coming up on the main thing. Make sure you subscribe to all of our CBN News podcasts and our Substack, faithwire.substack.com. Join that growing community of believers who are praying through the news of the day. And more prayer, the better. And we're doing that over at faithwire.substack.com. And with that, we're going to head to the news in 90 seconds. And a major showdown is brewing in Venezuela as 6 international airlines have halted flights to Caracas after U.S. officials warned of growing danger in Venezuelan airspace. The Trump administration is expected to formally label the Maduro-linked drug cartel as a foreign terrorist organization, signaling a major escalation. A U.S. Navy carrier group and B-52 bombers are already stationed off Venezuela's coast. Part of what the White House says is a mission to stop drug trafficking into the United States. President Trump isn't ruling out sending American troops, saying the U.S. must take care of Venezuela. Since September, the U.S. has carried out at least 20 strikes on suspected drug boats, killing more than 80 people. Lawmakers are split. Some say the action is constitutional and overdue, while others warn it could fracture Trump's America First base, which is largely isolationist. And a violent street takeover in New York is raising serious questions about public safety. Councilwoman Vicky Palladino says a large group from outside a neighborhood flooded a quiet street just after midnight, describing it as an illegal takeover. And on video and viral videos that have gone around social media, you can see a homeowner getting attacked by this mob on his own front yard. Crazy situation unfolding, and there were no police in sight. Those are just some of today's top headlines. You can check out more stories over at cbnnews.com. And this story caught my eye, guys, because it feels like one of those consequences of lenient sentences that we've been seeing around major metropolitan areas, where they've just decided, for whatever reason, to go soft on crime, and it's emboldened criminals. And this is like a quiet suburban street in New York. And it's crazy if you watch these videos. There's just like a car meetup, and it's like dozens of people out there with their cars at like 1 a.m. or something crazy like that. And they have no shame whatsoever, actually yelling at a homeowner. And it's just crazy that this is even remotely acceptable. And, you know, the councilwoman there criticized the 911 response, saying callers were told to contact a quality of life team or 311 instead of getting immediate police help. That is crazy. One guy was attacked, and you can see it on video. And it's really kind of miraculous that it didn't escalate into more than that. But this is unacceptable. And these sorts of policies, I think, are the sorts of things that people are taking note of.
Yeah, I think the fact that this is rampant and New York City just elected Mamdani as its mayor, I think is indicative of what is probably to come. I mean, he has distanced himself from the defund the police movement that he was a part of, years ago in 2020, 21, when that was popular. But he did just do an interview, I believe, last week, Dan, where he did say the special team within the NYPD that is dispatched whenever there's riots. He said, we're going to dismantle that. We're going to do away with that. And we're going to have some other peaceful model of, community organizer type thing. And I think, man, he has no idea what he's in for with New York City.
Oh my goodness. I mean, just imagine we see how mocked UN peacekeeping forces are. Imagine if you came up to a mob scene like that and were said, hi, I'm a community organizer. Can we talk?
Right, let's all have some coffee together and just talk it over. Put down your guns and the bats that you're beating buildings down with.
Yeah. Common sense seems to be a little bit dead. Yeah.
We'll pay for your therapy and counseling. We're just going to expect you to actually show up at those appointments.
Right.
It'll be interesting to see. Yeah, exactly. How Mamdani addresses this, because he has to. When things like this happen, people can talk about how much they're against the police or different policies all they want. But when they feel like their lives are threatened or their neighborhoods are threatened, people don't like that. They want safety. And so they're going to be looking for some sort of response from him. And if he doesn't have any alternatives, if the city isn't proposing any alternatives to keep people safe, then I think people are going to slowly realize that these soft on crime policies are dangerous. And just that, they're soft on crime. They're just going to allow it to continue to thrive.
Yeah. And if you can and you're able, people are just going to leave, because why would you stay in a place that are, one of the first comments under this councilwoman's post here was from someone who looked like an attorney who had represented an individual who defended themselves with a firearm from a similar situation, and then ended up, they're the ones that got in trouble. And now I don't know that case specifically, but I've seen that happen before, where you're getting people now. I mean, we saw Daniel Penny on the subway get charged after trying to help people in a situation. And so when you start getting charged, you've got mobs of crazy people, and then you get charged for trying to stop it. That's just a recipe for disaster, because that's just going to embolden the thugs, and it's going to make other people who would have been potential do-gooders sit back and say, I'm not going to risk it. Either I'm going to move to another city and get out of here, or I'm just not getting involved in that altercation, because then my freedom will be on the line. So a really crazy situation that's boiling. It's not just New York. I mean, this is happening in a lot of progressive cities around the country. So we'll certainly keep an eye on it. But our own Dale Hurd has reported several times from Oregon, and also Brody Carter up in San Francisco. And we've seen very similar instances of just brazen crimes, largely driven by soft on crime policies that allow it to happen. All right, we're going to go to the focus story now. As Madison mentioned there at the top of the podcast, a court in Ohio reversed its decision to shut down a church ministry that was running a homeless shelter. So tell us about what's happening and catch us up on the backstory.
Yeah, this is a story that we've been reporting on since the legal battles began over 2 years ago, when the city of Bryant, Ohio, attempted to shut down this church's ministry's homeless shelter. And it started back in March of 2023 when Chris Avil, who is the pastor of a church called Dad's Place in Bryant, Ohio, began operating his ministry 24 hours a day with the intentions of serving his community. And his goal was to provide refuge for anyone who needs shelter, comfort, or to speak with someone about faith at any hour of the day. But a few months after, city officials started harassing Pastor Chris with multiple criminal and civil proceedings. The first was an order to not allow overnight guests, and then that escalated to nearly 24 criminal charges for allegedly violating city codes. And part of that included middle of the night fire inspections, or you could probably call them raids. They were very unexpected. And so that was happening. And since then, the city has been attempting to shut down the church's ministry through multiple other criminal and civil proceedings.
So what's the latest update here in this case?
Yeah, so there's been a few wins and a few steps back in this case leading up to now. Like in January of 2024, when First Liberty filed a federal lawsuit against the city and won, allowing Pastor Chris to keep his church doors open. But then a few months later, city officials arrived for another surprise inspection and filed more criminal charges, starting the process over again. But just this week, Ohio's 6th District Court of Appeals reversed an injunction allowing Dad's Place to continue its temporary shelter ministry as the city prosecutes its civil enforcement action in the trial court. And First Liberty is also still working on totally clearing Pastor Chris from the criminal conviction that's pending. So basically, the trial court was directed to consider Dad's Place's claim under the Ohio Constitution and to reconsider their free exercise claim under the U.S. Constitution, because city officials were demanding the church install an expensive fire suppression system. While they don't require any of the local motels, most of the apartment complexes, and even a senior living facility in the area to install fire suppression systems in their buildings. So it definitely seemed like a biased attack and an attempt to shut down this church's ministry.
Yeah, definitely. And so what are Pastor Chris's attorneys saying?
Well, they emphasize that Ohio and federal law alike protect vital ministries like Dad's Place because religious exercise, including serving the most vulnerable at their time of greatest need, should deserve the highest protection afforded by the law. That's in the city's interest too. And they said that they're grateful that the court recognized the important issues of constitutional law at hand and ensured that Dad's Place can continue operating its ministry, especially as temperatures begin to drop in Bryant. And they hope that this decision will also serve as a turning point in this case and that the city will finally end its two-war campaign against the church and Pastor Chris. And on that note, they're also thankful that Dad's Place is heading into the holiday season without an injunction hanging over its head. That's huge.
Yeah, it really is. And it's hard not to feel targeted, like you were saying, because we've seen how many times drag queen story hours and all these sexually perverted things being foisted upon society. And there's, everyone's just turning the other way there. No violations to be found here. And then you have an organization like this doing something noble and good, which is providing people who need a place to stay, a warm place to stay, especially in winter months. And you would think these types of laws, these types of codes are things you kind of got to go out of your way to seek them out and crack down on them. Like somebody has to complain, there has to be something egregious going on. People coming into a church to sleep. I mean, it's crazy to me that somebody would even bother trying to find and nitpick some code that they're violating in order to go after them. So it's hard not to look at this and think someone had an axe to grind.
Well, I guess the old adage is true that no good deed goes unpunished here. I mean, it's crazy to me. Also, Madison, some of the violations that you were listing off that nobody else is kind of held to, it's like, okay, well, either the guy sleeps on the street outside, right, or he's going inside. Even though we've got some alleged code violations, I think it's probably safer for him to be where there's a roof over his head. So
right, you can picture the person there in your scenario tray that you're laying out, like the person who's homeless, going, no, wait, like I don't care about the fire alarm. Like I'll take the bed. I like the blanket. I don't want to get out. We're keeping you safe, can't you see? I mean, geez.
Yeah. So this whole story to me is just absurd. Like, I think anybody, I'm sure, who's listening to this podcast, it's like if you've got two brain cells to rub together, you can tell, like, okay, I think this makes sense. Let the guy sleep in the church building. So yeah, this just seems, if it's not targeting, they've done a really good job of making it look like it. So yeah, I don't know exactly what the deal is here, but yeah, crazy story.
You could imagine the code marshal coming in here, how great of a character, how well loved of a character they would be in a movie, right?
Yes.
Well, I'm sorry, like the heartwarming moment, we find a bed for the person with no bed, and the code man comes in and goes, well, actually, you're violating section 1, 2, 3, 4. I mean, yeah.
This is a Hallmark movie, but with a terrible ending instead of a good one.
Final thoughts on this, Madison?
Yeah, I think it would be interesting to hear from some of the people who are benefiting from this shelter or from all the other ways that they serve 24/7, talking to people about their faith, about their mental health. I mean, it really is. They're serving so many different purposes. And I'm sure those people who are using those services would argue for the church to remain open, for the shelter to stay open. And that's just an important reason for the community to be aware of what's going on and to also, when they can, speak up in defense of this. And thankfully, this pastor has not backed down and First Liberty is still fighting. So yeah, hopefully this will be the last update for a while and they'll be continuing their mission to serve, but we will keep you all posted here.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate that. And hopefully we can be praying that common sense will prevail at the end of the day here and that people will have warm places to sleep instead of having to be forced out into the street while somebody's checking on a code. It's crazy. But appreciate you bringing that to the podcast today. And we're going to go to the main thing now. And after October's final hostage and the hostages were released, Israeli doctors moved fast, checking for hidden and mental emergencies among these released hostages. When the last hostage left, they finally shut down the lights. Well, CBN's Julie Stahl has more from Jerusalem on what really happened in those first minutes back from Gaza. That's today's main thing.
In a symbolic gesture, doctors at the Rabin Medical Center recently turned off the lights in their hostage care unit as the last living hostage released left for home.
It's a lot more complicated than the pictures, of course. The minute they come back, the first thing we do is we actually see that there is nothing, that there's no emergency, medical emergency or mental emergency.
During the last 2 years, doctors here treated 40 returning hostages, including 5 of the last 20 Hamas released in October.
We hear terrible stories. We hear stories that you can't sleep at night after hearing, and some of them were kept in such small spaces they couldn't even stretch their hands. The food that they were eating or not eating, the variety, everything affects their physical and mental state.
Professor Noah Eliakim Raz, who oversaw the unit here, says the medical staff had to learn and develop protocols as they went along.
It's new medicine, of course. There is not a hostages medicine. It's not a field that you learn in medical school.
Raz told CBN News while doctors thoroughly checked their newly freed patients, just dealing with injuries from October 7th can revive the trauma. And leaving the hospital is not the end of the journey.
Some of the returnees that returned more than 6 months ago are still going through medical procedures, surgeries. It can teach us about the situation. The fact that people are standing and smiling when they come back home is only a small part of the puzzle.
Alon Ohel spent 2 years in captivity. Wounded on October 7th, he did not receive treatment and suffered harsh conditions in tunnels, including starvation. Alon recently returned to the hospital for orthopedic and exceptional eye surgeries.
The moment we realized that it might be possible to restore Alon's sight, this was an emotional moment and a very remarkable one.
The surgeries were a success. New York physician Dr. Mark Siegel, an internal medicine specialist, told CBN News it's a wonder the hostages survived. He says mental recovery takes longer than the physical.
Dehumanization, depersonalization, nightmares, severe anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder. They're being handled right now with kindness, with compassion. Their families are playing a huge role at nursing them back to health. The sensitivity that it takes to deal with someone in this condition is extremely important.
Professor Raz helped treat the mothers and a grandmother who came out as part of the first hostage release in November 2023.
The resilience and strength that these mothers showed is impossible to capture.
She praises the creativity used by the hostages to train their brains to learn things while in captivity.
You hear incredible stories about how they train themselves to keep track of time. They know to tell you exactly dates and hours of things they did in captivity. And it's unbelievable. Everyone held on to something that gave him hope.
She adds that the suffering the hostages endured can affect their health and lives for decades.
And you can see that not only psychological influence, but also physical influences, more heart disease, more dental problems, and even premature aging, even 4 decades forward. So the body remembers.
They will need to receive further care for years with the goal of building resilience.
The main thing is to bring them back to life. And the goals are very different and then change from one to the other. For one person, going back to life is running a family, and for the other, it's playing the piano, and for the third one is going back to the army.
Families play an essential role in the rehabilitation process. Roz likens it almost to giving birth.
They get this person back. They don't really know what to expect. It's learning each other again. They are different, and the returnees are different. The families change too.
She says the staff felt privileged to work with the hostages. Her hope is that Israelis as a whole will learn from this crisis the importance of being a community and working together. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
And that's the key to recovery, is realizing you're back in community, and people with love and compassion are reaching back out to you, saying, welcome home. This is going to be an ongoing problem in Israel, and it's not just the hostages returning. My observation is the entire country has been traumatized. Everyone knew someone who was either taken as a hostage or was part of the IDF trying to bring them home, and part of that invasion of Gaza in order to do that. But where is the world outrage on this is a question I keep coming back to, that somehow or other Hamas was justified because of Israeli occupation in taking people away from their homes, literally in the morning, getting them out of bed and taking them into dark tunnels in Hamas and keeping them for 2 years. Where is the world outrage on that? There's no justification for that. There's just pure hatred. And let's call it for what it was. October 7th was the face of evil, and the whole world saw it. And here we are with the consequences of that. Where is the outrage against Hamas, as once again they are trying to rearm, once again they're trying to attack Israel? That ideology of hate, it just needs to be named for what it is. It's evil.
All right, Julie, appreciate that report there. And if you're not seeing reports from our Jerusalem team, make sure you're staying tuned to cbnnews.com and also the CBN News YouTube page. Lots of great stuff, great updates coming from Jerusalem constantly, and you'll really have a good feel for what is happening over there from our wonderful team in Jerusalem over there. That's going to leave us with time on the podcast today. For one last thing, we're going to take a look at Colossians 1:24. Now I rejoice in my sufferings for your sake, and in my flesh I am filling up what is lacking in Christ's afflictions for the sake of his body, that is, the church. And so Paul goes on here to talk about why he's rejoicing in these sufferings, and he's glad to know that he's able to make known Christ and the supremacy and the sufficiency of Christ to all, to the Gentiles and to the Jews. And so he continues to point people in that direction, even in the midst of his suffering.
Yeah, and it makes me think of this pastor that we were just talking about, of Dad's Place and all the trials that he's facing, and that this verse encourages us that Paul was rejoicing in his sufferings for the sake of the church, and so is this pastor and so many others, and that's what inspires us and gives us hope to keep going.
Yeah, we face setbacks and difficulties, and in other parts of the world, persecution, but as Scripture says, great is our reward in heaven.
Amen and amen. Great spot to leave it there on this edition of the Quick Start Podcast. As always, make sure you're getting yourself on over each and every day to cbnnews.com, faithwire.com. You get more news from a Christian perspective there. Also check out our CBN News YouTube channel as well. A lot of great content coming up there every day. Lord willing, that creek don't rise up on us. See you back here tomorrow. God bless. Enjoy the rest of your day.